Hey guys, tonight we open with dawn breaking over a muddy wasteland, your rifle's cold metal pressing into your shoulder as you squint through the fog, your heart racing with every muted thump of distant artillery. You're perched in a shallow slit trench, binoculars at your side and sandbags piled high, wondering if this misty morning will be the one that finally gets you. You probably won't survive this welcome to the snipers game in World War I. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and the local time in the comments so we can all see who's tuning in from around the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up a narrow duckboard pathway. As the sun peeks over the shattered trees, the cold air biting at your cheeks. Mainstream history tells us that the British Army officially deployed trained snipers using telescopic sights on the Lee Enfield rifle by late 1915, turning individual marksmen into dreaded hidden commission agents on both sides. Historians still argue whether sniping truly shifted the balance of power on the Western Front, or merely added a psychological layer of terror to an already brutal stalemate. The mist clings to your canvas jacket, turning your wool uniform damp and heavy. You grip your rifle, sensing its weight like a stubborn mule, about 10 pounds before you even count the ammunition strapped to your chest. You've heard fringe whispers among fellow sharpshooters of so-called periscope rifles, cobbled together to peer over no man's land without exposing yourself like some bizarre plumbing project gone deadly right. Ahead, the German trenches glimmer through the haze. A lone silhouette stands, maybe a sentry or another sniper trying to spot your head. You swallow the lump in your throat and raise your scope stiff as a statue. That tiny reticle feels like a spotlight pointed right at your eye, highlighting every tremor in your finger. Light joke number 1. You wonder if the Germans might send you a thank you card for providing such perfect target practice. If only their aim had been as polite. Your breathing slows as you recall the unconventional camouflage techniques you studied back at training. Burlap strips, crushed leaves, and even soot from shell blasts smeared on your helmet. Quirky rumor has it that some snipers attempted to fasten dead leaves to their uniforms so convincingly that enemy troops mistook them for part of the landscape talk about leaf blinders. But those tactics saved lives, and desperate times demanded desperate measures. Time stretches. Each heartbeat thumps like a distant drum. You remember trench mortar rounds, carving craters into fields you once thought picturesque, a harsh reality that anything pretty can kill you. Historians still argue whether the rise of sharpshooters forced tactical changes in infantry advances or simply ushered in newer ways to hide in muddy holes. A rustle at the trench lip makes you freeze. Your finger hovers over the trigger, cold and urgent. Light joke number 2. You'd laugh if you weren't so busy convincing yourself not to shake like a leaf in a storm. Each moment expands until it seems eternal. You catch movement, another German soldier stepping into view, rifle casually slung over his shoulder. You exhale, slowly realigning your crosshairs. Sniper tactics taught you to track the slightest shift in posture, the microsecond someone adjusts their weight. You squeeze the trigger and that signature crack echoes like a starting pistol in hell. The recoil jolts you backward and a flurry of mud sprays your cheek. Light joke number 3. You hope no one is filming this blooper reel in the sky. You watch through the fog as the soldier drops. Victory, maybe. Relief, brief. The real enemy is fatigue, fear, and frostbite creeping up from your damp boots. You duck down again, your heart still pounding. That single shot used one precious round in a war where supply lines often failed you. Another story for later. For now, the sun's warmth begins to burn off the mist. and you glimpse other silhouettes into distance, rifles at the ready. You realize that in this game of shadows, your life balances on a knife edge more than that of your hidden quarry. The sniper's paradox: you are both predator and prey. And as you settle back behind your scope, the world narrows to a mottled patch of mudwood and barbed wire, an arena for a deadly sort of hide-and-seek with no safe word. You settle back into the familiar squeeze of damp earth as frost creeps up your calf, turning your wool socks into ice packs. The trench walls loom close, spruce planks slick with mud and morning dew. You tuck your rifle beside you and pull your greatcoat tighter, feeling each shiver ripple through your bones. You try to will time itself to move faster. Hours stretch like stale chewing gum. Mainstream history tells us that many soldiers spend up to 12 hours a day in isolated dugouts enduring hypothermia and trench foot as water pooled beneath their duckboards. Historians still argue whether more frequent rotations would have significantly reduced these cold injuries or simply traded one set of casualties for another. You press your back against the soaking wood, recalling the burlap and moss camouflage you perfected yesterday. A callback from Section 1, that leaf-clad uniform, might keep you hidden, but it does nothing against frostbite, fringe chatter among sharpshooters, whispers of ice talc mixtures, crushed snow blended with chalk to reduce glare on metallic scopes. You wonder if someone actually tried baking your rifle barrel in a snowbank for insulation, or if it's just another of those absurd battlefield legends. Your teeth chatter in a relentless rhythm. Light joke number 1. You'd give just about anything for a hot chocolate. But the only brew here is mud-flavored tea, brewed by someone who forgot to change the water yesterday. A steamy mug seems as mythical as a ceasefire. Time drags. You watch rivulets of frozen water trickle down the trench steps, then vanish as they hit the warmer floor. You shift weight onto one foot and then the other, desperate to keep blood flowing. Yet each move sends tendrils of pain through your toes. Trench foot, a ghastly condition, named for exactly what it sounds like, could set in within hours. Your division's medical reports noted over 20,000 British cases in just a few winters. With each passing minute, the world feels thinner, as if your very skin might crack like fine porcelain. You wonder if that periscope rifle trick from earlier sections could work underwater as well as under snow, another callback to your makeshift plumbing invention. The thought makes you chuckle, but your laughter is swallowed by the hush of a shell explosion miles away. Light joke number 2. You half expect Frost itself to line up on the enemy parapet and start taking shots at your nature's sniper rifle. At least it wouldn't need ammo. Despite the cold, your senses sharpen to a crystalline point. Each distant thud of artillery is a footstep in a macabre dance. You grip the rifle sling tighter, feeling the coarse wool of your gloves scratch your palm. Your nose runs like a faulty faucet, but you resist wiping it on your sleeve, another recipe for frostbite. The trench water laps at your ankles, a foul brew of mud, decaying wood, and who knows what else. Quirky rumor claims that some soldiers added tobacco to the water to fend off bacteria, while others swore fish scales from dead trout could line the trench floor for better drainage. You're tempted to try anything at this point, but you're not that desperate yet. Mobility is a myth down here. Every shift in position feels like moving boulders. You rely on periodic visits from runners, those brave souls who thread the mazes of barbed wire to deliver messages. Historians still argue whether the use of telephones and signal flares could have replaced these human couriers, or if technology would have simply made communication breakdowns more catastrophic. Light joke number 3. You daydream about sending a carrier pigeon with GPS coordinates only for it to come back asking for directions. Technology in 1916 feels about as reliable as your chipped enamel mess tin. As the midday sun weakly peeks through the overhead boards, you spot a glint on your scope's adjustment dial. Tiny ice crystals catching the light. You remove them one by one, careful not to jam the mechanism. You remember from training that lubricating oils turn to paste in sub-zero temperatures. So many marksmen switch to animal fats. The thought of rubbing bacon grease into your sights makes you queasy, but you do worse to keep your aim true. The hours drift on. A cold wind whistles along the trench lip, carrying the metallic tinge of blood from some distant sector. You press your ear to the ground, picking up the rumble of artillery, a rolling thunder that shakes your teeth. You focus on steadying your breath, inhaling slowly to calm the pounding in your chest. In the far distance, you catch movement, 2 German soldiers walking past their parapet. You lift your scope, but your fingers tremble so badly that the crosshairs dance. You swallow hard, recalling the snap recoil from your first kill back in Section 1. Now the cold makes every shot feel like firing a cannon into your face. You remember the medical warning: if your fingers go numb, your shot goes straight into the clay. You weigh whether to try and warm your hands by tucking them under your armpits, an absurd posture that might leave you even more exposed. Your mind wanders. Back home, you once complained about lukewarm baths. Now, the mere memory of a steaming wash feels like an epic luxury. You imagine a hot tub bubbles popping, someone handing you cocoa. You catch yourself smiling a small victory against the relentless cold. But the front's rules remain unchanged as target or be targeted. You press forward with the hope that rotation orders will come soon. Every marksman dreamt of restful nights in a warm barn beyond the lines. Though rumors had it those barns often had lice, worse than the trenches themselves. Even comfort comes with a price. Finally, your sergeant's gruff voice crackles through the field telephone. Stand down in 10. Relief floods you like spilled tea. You pack your gear, knees cracking, and hoist your rifle. Frost still clings to your cuffs, but your heart beats with something warmer, anticipation of escape. You stumble onto the duckboards, boots squelching, and start the climb out. Behind you, the trench falls silent once more, just mud and echoes waiting for the next shift. You pause at the lip, looking back at the frozen corridor you've called home for hours. In this icy embrace, you've survived another brutal vigil, proof that sometimes the real enemy isn't the distant sniper, but the relentless cold and soggy loneliness. And as you trudge back toward the rear lines, you carry with you the knowledge that tomorrow you'll return to that frozen hug, ready to play the waiting game all over again. You step off the muddy duckboards and trudge toward the makeshift weapons hut, every movement weighted by exhaustion. Your rifle thumps against your back like a cranky mule, reminding you of its stubborn promise to misfire at the worst possible second. Today's task: clean and repair that bolt-action beast, hoping to fend off any jam when a target finally appears. In official records, the Lee Enfield Mark III boasted a rapid magazine-fed bolt-action, capable of 5 aim shots per second in expert hands, earning it a reputation as the rifleman's rifle. Historians still argue whether its famed rate of fire truly outclassed the German Mauser 98's accuracy and reliability under combat stress. You fling open the hut's flap and peer inside. Cobwebs cradle discarded oil cans, while stained cleaning cloths hang like battle flags. The air stinks of gunpowder and sweat. You drop your pack and set the rifle on a rickety table, fingers already itching to strip it down. First, you disassemble the rifle with methodical precision, noting each bolt and spring. Fringe lore among battlefield tinkerers claims some snipers would slip barbed wire hooks through the bolt to stealthily extract jammed casings, like performing surgery with garden tools. You laugh at the absurd image of yourself poking around in your rifle with a wire hook. Light joke number 1. You imagine writing DIY sniper hacks on a trench bulletin board, right under wanted clean socks. A quick mental callback to that periscope rifle plumbing project from Section 1. It'd make an epic episode of Trench MasterChef. You wipe each part with a rag soaked in kerosene, clearing grit, and caked on mud. Your gloves, patched and threadbare, absorb the solvent, leaving your palms raw. A supply sergeant once whispered that French cognac made an excellent lubricant in the absence of oil. Though most officers frowned on swapping precious booze for rifles, another quirky tip you'll never trust. The barrel's rifling gleams once cleaned, and you move to inspect the firing pin. A tiny burr could spell disaster. One misfire here means a fatal twitch of your finger. You run your thumbnail along its edge, feeling for imperfections. Historians still argue whether the British military should have standardized cleaning kits for snipers or left them to scavenge their gear. Light joke number 2. You glance at a half-eaten bully beef tin lying nearby and wonder if its contents would double as grease in a pinch, though the thought of smeared corned beef in your action makes you queasy. With parts clean, you reassemble each click and snap, satisfying as the rifle returns to form. You chamber around, cycling the bolt, smoothly cleaning success. Your eyes trace the polished wood stock, scarred by shrapnel and trench debris. You feel a pang as you remember the first rifle you held back at basic, a shiny new, model 1903, all promise and gleam. This battered companion, however, has more stories than any recruit. Light joke number 3. You consider naming your rifle. Old Reliable seems cliched, but Grumpy Gus might fit its temperamental nature. You tuck the rifle sling over your shoulder and step back into the chill air. Outside, you adjust your scope, dropping a custom drop tube full of graphite dust into the elevation turret to ease friction, a fringe trick passed down through sharpshooter circles. You frame the distant tree line through the lens. Focus, breathe, steady. But the real test lies ahead. A sergeant's shout echoes, German officers spotted near a ruined chapel. Your finger itches on the trigger as adrenaline surges. You shoulder your rifle and move back into position. Every oil smear and graphite smudge is worth it, if that shot counts. And as you press your cheek against the stock, you know that maintenance isn't just about machinery. It's about survival. You slip back into the trench rifle raised and pause to gather handfuls of foul-smelling mud from a nearby bank. The mud laced with decomposed leaves, and the acrid stench of rotting turf feels sticky between your fingers. You press it thickly onto your helmet and jacket, mashing in clumps of moss torn from the trench wall. It clings to you like some grotesque second skin. But that's the point. Tonight, you want to be nothing more than a bump in the earth. By 1916, both British and German forces had begun experimenting with improvised camouflage, often smearing soldiers in mud or wrapping themselves in burlap sacking dyed to match the terrain, marking one of the earliest uses of battlefield concealment en masse. Historians still argue whether the lack of standardized camouflage patterns hindered early sniper effectiveness or simply reflected the technological limits of the era. As you settle into your chosen position, a springy patch of brambles overhead, you feel the mud cooling against your neck and cheeks. Light joke number 1. You'd swear you're auditioning for a role in a swamp-themed pantomime, if not for the part where missing your target means an unpleasant end. The reality is mud, once hailed as a comforting protector, has a knack for making you smell worse than a latrine. You recall fringe chatter among the most innovative marksmen about smearing themselves with whatever was at hand, burnt cork for smoky hues, charcoal mixed with animal fat for waterproofing even mashed blackberries for a purplish tint. Wild rumors suggested some snipers coated their gear in fish oil. To deter lies a stinky method that left them smelling like a fisherman's net. You're not volunteering to test that theory. Your uniform's mottled pattern now blends almost perfectly with the shattered hedgerow across no man's land. Through your scope, you watch German soldiers patrolling what remains of a once vibrant orchard. They stroll casually, unaware of your disguised form just meters away. You give yourself a mental shrug. This hideous mosaic of mud and foliage is your best friend out here. But camouflage comes with costs. That weight of damp earth drags at your shoulders, making every motion more labored. Your joints protest as you shift to cover a new stretch of wire. The added layer dulls your senses of touch by the time an enemy rounds the corner. You might not even feel the bolt catch. You grit your teeth and force yourself to move with deliberate slowness, resisting the urge to wipe sweat into your muddy sleeve and ruin the illusion. Light joke number 2. You wonder if Picasso trapped in the trenches would have called this Guernica mud. Funny enough, the first official British camouflage section wouldn't form until 1916, inspired by painters trained in color and pattern soldiers whose artistic flair would be weaponized at the front. Historians still argue whether artistic camouflage outperformed ad hoc mud tactics, or if uniform patterns would have been wasted on the ever-changing battlefield. As dusk deepens, you sink lower, letting the brambles and mud swallow your silhouette. Frogs croak somewhere beyond the wire, a countryside lullaby gone wrong. You clamp your cheek to the stalk and scan the faint outlines of enemy dugouts across the field. Every leaf you strategically affix to your tunic seems to twirl in the breeze, testing your patience. Your nose wrinkles as bits of rotting moss tickle your nostrils. You fight the urge to sneeze. One explosive blast of air could send specks of mud raining down, revealing your carefully crafted disguise. The world feels pointedly silent. No great roar of artillery, no chatter of troops, just the distant drip of condensation and the pounding of your own heart. Fringe legend holds that some snipers crafted elaborate leaf nets, wire frameworks, covered in canvas and foliage, to create mini observation hides called clay pigs, but few had the patience or materials to build them at the front. You peek around a splintered tree stump, instead your muddy face merging into the mottled background. It works the Germans patrol straight past mere yards away. Your chest tightens with both relief and a twinge of guilt at their obliviousness. Light joke number 3. You imagine sending them a note later. Thanks for the free tour. Of course, that would be absurd since you can't exactly stroll across no man's land anytime soon. Instead, you hold perfectly still, breath-controlled eyes locked on a lone corporal inspecting barbed wire. Time passes in a soggy smear of shadows. You sense the elasticity of your camouflage, straining against movement. Every shift, a slight knee bend or a discreet swivel, feels like dragging a brush through paint. If only you could peel off this layer and emerge clean and fresh on the other side. But the front doesn't afford such luxuries. Finally, the corporal's silhouette dissolves into the dark. You allow yourself a small smile and a gentle exhale that sends a few flakes of mud tumbling from your sleeve. You freeze, but they're gone, swallowed by the night. Peeling your face free of gritty layers is out of the question. The risk of revealing a pale skin is too great. Instead, you draw your scarf over your mouth, trying to stave off the rancid scent. The cost of concealment is sensory deprivation. The taste of bitterness in your mouth, faces pressed through filth, and the faint echo of your humanity lost under camouflage's creepy cloak. You sink deeper into the muddy embrace, the weight of it oddly comforting now that the patrol has passed. In this hideous chrysalis, you are both an invisible hunter and an unwilling slug sliding ever closer to your next shot or your next fall. You press your back against the sodden trench wall, rifle across your lap, as a rat skitters past your boot, its beady eyes glinting in the dim light. You watch it dart toward your rations, whiskers twitching. You're halfway tempted to shoo it away, but you know this vermin thrives here more than you do. Welcome to the rat sniper paradox, your greatest ally in distraction and your worst enemy in disease. Official reports estimate that for every British soldier killed by enemy fire, 2 died from disease, many propagated by rats that feasted on unburied corpses and contaminated food stores. Historians still argue whether better trench sanitation or systematic rat hunting campaigns would have significantly reduced these casualties, or if the sheer scale of the front made such measures futile. You uncap your tin of bully beef and watch the rat leap forward, claws scrabbling at the lid. Fringe gossip among marksmen spoke of experimental message rats, trained rodents, carrying tiny capsules with coordinates slipped beneath enemy lines. You roll your eyes, unlikely that someone could leash a rat any better than a bombed-out horse. Yet the thought flits through your mind, if a rat could deliver intel, maybe one could deliver your escape letter back home. Light joke number 1. You half expect the rat to demand its own scout's pay, or at least a share of your biscuits. Instead, you lob a crusty piece of bread in its direction. It snags the prize and bolts, leaving you with mud-scented air and the lingering stench of rat breath. Your stomach growls. The stale bread tastes of damp earth, but you eat it anyway. Calories count even if they come with extra protein. You recall that during the Somme offensive, rats were observed gnawing through live flesh, an act so ghastly it spawned whispered theories of zoonotic transmission far worse than trench fever. You shudder but pinch yourself, no bite tonight, thankfully. The rat's tail disappears into a drainage culvert, and your gaze drifts across the trench's slimy floor. Water pools in rivulets reflecting ghostly flashes of nearby flares. You tiptoe past a mound of soggy sandbags to peer over the edge. The no-man's land beyond shudders under sporadic shell bursts. Rat or no rat, your focus snaps back to the mission. Locate the highest enemy parapet and tag your target. Suddenly, another rodent scrambles up the trench ladder behind you, a hefty fellow, bold as brass. You freeze, heart thumping. Light joke number 2. You wonder if this one's come to evaluate your marksmanship? Maybe it's the new trench inspector. You lift your rifle, but common sense stops you before you aim. You're a sniper, not a rat assassin. You settle back into the mud, noting that pathogens carried by these beasts likely caused more trench foot and ulcerations than water alone. A medical officer once noted that infected rats caused up to 80% of trench fever cases in some battalions. Historians still argue whether more aggressive rat culling or relocation efforts using terriers and traps could have stemmed the disease tide or simply driven the rats deeper into soldiers' quarters. Your gloves slip in the mud as you adjust your scope strap. You remember fringed tales of snipers using rat skins to fashion grudgingly useful insulation pouches for cartridges, another desperate fringe innovation born of necessity. The very thought makes you both queasy and eerily fascinated. Light joke number 3. You mused with a comrade that the real enemy might just be the armada of oversized rats plotting to overthrow trench command. The laughter that followed was brief. No humor truly masks the horror down here. Your eyelids droop as the rat's skittering recedes. Exhaustion weighs on you heavier than mud ever could. You lean forward, balancing your rifle on a makeshift rest. A lone farmhouse at the horizon snaps into view through the gloom. You raise your sights, tracking the figure of an enemy officer pacing a parapet. Your finger hovers tense with anticipation. Suddenly, a distant shell bursts, sending reverberations through the trench floor. The farmhouse silhouette wavers. You hesitate, debating whether to take the shot now or wait for clearer optics. Historians still argue whether snipers should prioritize high-value targets like officers or focus on disrupting artillery crews to blunt enemy barrages. Your finger squeezes the trigger. The crack rings out, startling a nearby rat into a mad dash. The officer drops another career cut short. A pang of guilt flares in your chest. That man had a name, a family, a life. But you remind yourself of the orders: eliminate command figures to hasten the end of this madness. You exhale, adrenaline ebbing. The trench feels colder now, the mud more oppressive. You pat the rat-infested warren beneath you goodbye temporarily. Rotation orders might come by dawn, but rats stay all year. As you pack your gear, you wonder if trench evolution will ever include rat-proof shelters or if rodents will win the war by attrition. You climb out, rifle slung as a rat peeks over the trench rim, perhaps curious, perhaps waiting for its next meal. You offer a mock salute and step back into the twilight. Somewhere behind you, the rat sniper paradox continues. In the chase for enemy soldiers, you became both a hunter of humans and unwitting host to countless pests. You trudge back toward the support lines, the mud sucking at your boots. Each step echoes the endless cycle fight, freeze feast on rations defended by vermin, and return only to repeat. It's a war of attrition in which bullets are scarce. But rats never run short, and as the trench network swallows you once more, you realize that sometimes the fiercest battles aren't fought on the horizon, but right beneath your feet in the company of creatures you'd rather not call friends. You press your cheek into the cold stock and scan the distant ridge. Through your scope, every nerve taut as a violin string. The crack of your rifle still echoes in your ears, mingling with the distant thunder of German artillery. Now comes the real twist. You're no longer just a hunter, you're prey to another hidden marksman. Official records show that by mid-1916, both sides had deployed dedicated counter-sniper teams using mirrors, sound detection devices, and observation posts to triangulate enemy rifle reports and silence those deadly lenses. Historians still argue whether these primitive acoustic locators actually saved lives or simply fueled an endless game of hide-and-seek that caused more men in exposure than indirect fire. You shift slightly, feeling the mud-smeared camouflage tug at your shoulder, recalling the bramble hide from Section 4 as your makeshift observation deck. Fringe whispers among sharpshooters speak of using concave earpieces fashioned from discarded shell casings to amplify the snap of distant bolts, supposedly giving away enemy positions. Like some bizarre metal stethoscope, you adjust your battered leather cap, half wondering if you should have stuffed one of those shells inside your ear. Light joke number 1. You imagine a rival sniper popping out of the mist and yelling "gotcha" like a grim-faced carnival barker. The reality, of course, is far more nerve-wracking. No flourish, just the silent calculus of life and death. The ridge crackles with radio chatter as your sergeant informs you that a suspected German sniper has been picking off your comrades at dusk. You recall the chilling stories from Section 2 about soldiers frozen in their tracks by unseen rifles. Now you're tasked with locating this phantom sharpshooter before he locates you. You lie perfectly still, relying on the subtle hum of artillery as a mask. Official manuals recommended firing decoy shots and watching for muzzle flashes, the old shoot and scoot tactic. Historians still argue whether decoys gave away more huntsmen than hunted, or if the psychological terror of imagined shooters was as deadly as real bullets. Your finger hovers near the trigger, but you're not aiming at the enemy trench. Instead, you survey the broken tree line to your left, where a sudden glint, a flash of reflected sunlight catches your eye. You freeze eye-glued to the lens, and there it is, a faint shimmer on a gun barrel perched atop a shell crater. Light joke number 2. You half expect the German to be sipping tea behind that scope, offering you a polite saucer in exchange for orderly conduct. But this is war, not a garden party. You exhale slowly, centering your crosshairs on that pinprick of metal. Before you can squeeze the trigger, a whistle of a shell arcs overhead, slamming into the earth between you and the hunter. Dirt sprays like a twisted fountain, and the sniper vanishes as quickly as he appears. Your hard-hammer's counter-sniper fire has spooked him off. You remind yourself that sometimes the loudest weapons are the ones you don't see. A callback to Section 3, you grip your freshly cleaned bolt action and switch to a decoy tactic, firing 2 rounds into a harmless knoll. Then you slip to a nearby sapling, moving stealthily like a ghost. Each step crunches mud and broken branches underfoot, threatening to betray your position. Fringe lore holds that some elite snipers would tie a small mirror to a branch at an angle that reflected muzzle flashes toward enemy lines, creating phantom shooters to confuse counter-sniper teams. You peek around the tree, but no mirrored illusions greet you, just the same twisted barbed wire. Light joke number 3. You wonder if you should start a side hustle, selling snipers magical mirror kits to confuse commanders on both sides. At least business would be booming. You settle into a shallow shell hole, breath measured, watching for the slightest movement in the road below. Hours pass. A crate-laden supply wagon rattles by, oblivious to the hidden drama above. You resist the urge to take a shot. You need the element of surprise, and friendly fire from your own side's counter-sniper is a nightmare you'd rather not face. According to trench communications logs, some counter-sniper units use periscopic listening devices, long tubes plunged into the ground to channel sound, while others relied on battlefield pigeons, trained to alert to sharp cracks, cooing wildly when shots were fired. Historians still argue whether animal-based detection was credible, or just another fringe fantasy. You breathe through your nostrils, willing the forest's natural chorus to drown out your heartbeat. Then, faint as a whisper, you catch it, the telltale click of a bolt being cocked. Your gaze darts to the right flank. There's a crouched figure behind a shattered wall rifle level. Your crosshairs lock onto a tattered sleeve and you squeeze. The shot echoes twice, once for the rifle, once for the hollow tree line. The figure dips and you don't wait to see if he falls. Instead, you pivot and fire again 3 rounds in rapid succession to ensure the threat is gone. The forest falls silent. Your ears ring. You lie low, heart racing, until your sergeant's distant voice crackles, "Sniper neutralized, well done." Relief washes over you, sweat chilling on your brow. Even the cold bite of Section 2 feels friendlier now. Yet, as you haul yourself back behind the trench parapet, you realize that each sniper duel is a conversation in echo shots, answered by shells, disclosures, met with decoys. Every victory laced with the fear of being hunted in return. You tuck your rifle away, senses still tingling, and ready yourself for the next twist in this cat-and-mouse game, where silence is both weapon and warning. You slosh through waist-deep water pooled at the trench bottom each step, sucking at your boots like an invisible hand, determined to hold you back. The stagnant brew is a foul cocktail of rainwater mud, rotting wood, and who knows what else, sometimes so deep it seeps into your webbed toes, leaving you squelching with every move. Mainstream history records that by 1917, over 100,000 Allied soldiers suffered trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to wet, unsanitary conditions, leading to mass amputation in extreme cases. Historians still argue whether better drainage systems or mandatory boot changes would have cut those numbers, or if the scale of the Western Front simply made prevention impossible. You steady yourself against the plank wall rifle held aloft to keep it dry. You recall reading a fringe anecdote about trench stilts, wooden ladders repurposed so some soldiers could stay out of the water entirely. The idea of lugging a ladder into battle strikes you as both ingenious and absurd, like using a parachute in a horse-drawn carriage. Light joke number 1. You'd love to see the look on a fresh recruit's face when you hand him day-old stilts instead of a rifle. Here, Billy used this hope you like splinters. The water laps at your knees, droplets catching the dim glow of flares overhead. You pause at a rusted duckboard, noting it's half-submerged, slick with algae. A slip here means sliding into a deeper pool, risking trench fever and infection from the slurry below. You edge along the board, praying your balance holds. In the distance, you spot a British corporal, lifting his foot and slapping it against the trench wall, white skin turning a ghastly shade of blue. You grit your teeth. Mud and water are the sniper's silent nemesis. You remember the sergeant's orders to rotate every few hours, but those rotations often depended on supply and manpower, not personal comfort. A fringe belief among tunnel rats and snipers claimed rubbing whale oil into boots created an impenetrable waterproof barrier, though critics said the smell alone was torture enough to demoralize troops. You sniff the air, no trace of blubber thankfully, but you wonder if that greasy aroma might have been worth it. Light joke number 2. You could call it perfume of the high seas, a sweaty, fishy eau de trench that says, "I'm here to kill, and I smell like Saturday night." Each inch forward is a negotiation with gravity and muck. You shift your pack higher on your shoulders, feeling the straps cut into your damp tunic. The rifle barrel dips ever so slightly. One misaligned shot could send a round skittering into the dirt, fouling your weapon at the exact moment you need it most. You recall from Section 3 how meticulously you cleaned your bolt action. Now every splatter of water threatens to undo your work. You pressed your scope cap closed, cursing the lack of a proper waterproof case. Historians still argue whether investing in better trench architecture or mobile sniper towers would have reduced these mundane but deadly snare traps. Lightning cracks somewhere far off, illuminating the murky corridor in harsh white. You jump at the flash, your heart pounding. A callback to Section 2, Frost, may not bite you now, but hypothermia lurks, even on summer nights, when chilled water seeps into your bones. Light joke number 3. You imagine writing a field guide titled, "Survive the trenches, avoid drowning in your hype." It'd top the bestseller lists. Just below, "How to sleep standing up." You kneel by a small lip of dry ground and set your rifle on its bipod, peering through the lens at a cluster of tin shacks on the far side. Your radar, silent, cold, and alert, heightens. The water around you forms concentric ripples with each heartbeat. You inhale, exhale, and squeeze off a shot. The bullet whistles through the dripping air and finds a German machine gunner inspecting his tripod. He slumps. Relief surges. Ammunition saved enemy down. You lean back, feeling mud ooze between your fingers, and shake your head at the absurdity. You've just fired a precise killing shot while ankle-deep in sewage. The juxtaposition makes you both proud and a little queasy. As the adrenaline fades, you gather yourself and shift to dry ground, planning your exit route. A shallow slope leads up to a composting heap, one of the few raised walkways left. You step carefully, boots squeaking. At the top, you pause to look back at the flooded trench behind you, the water's surface reflecting the dull glow of sparking flares. You heft your rifle and begin the climb out, muscles trembling from the cold, wet slog. The soggy maw of the trench closes behind you, leaving only the faint echo of dripping water and distant shouts. You realize that sometimes the deadliest trap in this war isn't enemy bullets, but the relentless grip of mud and water that can swallow you whole. You climb down another muddy ladder, into a cramped dugout, the wooden planks pressing tight against your shoulders. Inside, only a single oil lamp flickers, casting dancing shadows on the dirt walls. You're alone again, save for the ever-present drip of condensation echoing through the gloom. Isolation seeps into your bones, whispering doubts you didn't know you had. Historians record that snipers often spend days in solitary dugouts, sometimes up to 48 hours, without relief, cut off from their units, to maintain secrecy. Historians still argue whether longer deployments sharpened focus and lethality, or simply eroded morale and mental health beyond repair. You settle onto a rough bench rifle cradled in your lap. Fringe legend claims some marksmen carried miniature gramophones to play rousing tunes, while on watch, anything to keep the mind from fraying in the dark. You chuckle at the thought of Beethoven echoing off muddy walls. Light joke number 1. You'd love to swap your battle helmet for headphones and blast some jazz. If only you could find a wind-up record player that survived trench floods. The reality silence reigns, broken only by your thoughts. A single canvas bag hangs nearby, containing your meager supplies, a tattered novel, extra ammo, and a pouch of dried figs. You pull out the book, an adventure tale you've read a dozen times, and flip through the pages. The words blur. The story feels distant. Yet you cling to the notion that there's life beyond these walls. Medical reports from 1917 cite depression and shell shock as afflictions common among frontline sharpshooters, though many commanders dismiss them as cowardice. Historians still argue whether recognizing combat stress earlier could have saved countless lives, or if stigma and military culture would have blocked any real progress. You stare at the lamp's weak glow, noticing a small skeletal toad perched on a shelf, its body dried and shriveled. Fringe chatter suggests some snipers kept such spirit guides, believing the toad's lingering presence watched over them. You feel a chill but force yourself not to flinch. Light joke number 2. You muse that your spirit guide looks like it needs a good bullet, though shooting a toad in here would only make things smell worse. You set it aside and return to your novel, finding comfort in the mundane act. Your mind drifts back to home-warm kitchens, laughter, no peeping through a scope at dawn. The ache is sharp, more punishing than any bullet. You breathe in and out, trying to steady the tremor in your hands. A sudden creak above jolts you upright. You grab your rifle and press against the wall, adrenaline flooding. Light joke number 3. You'd hate to think that was just another rat staging a surprise review of your quarters. You lean back and exhale as nothing moves beyond dripping water and dust motes. You lean the rifle against the wall and stand, stepping toward the entrance to peer over the edge. The night air feels crisp on your face, a reminder that the world outside is both terrifying and free. In ways this cramped hole isn't. Fringe theories talk about dugout discipline, where some snipers perform calisthenics in the dark to stay limber, push-ups against walls and sit-ups on muddy floors. You consider the absurdity of trying handstands in here and decide to stick to stretches. You bend and twist, feeling muscles protest. The isolation gnaws at your mind. Every creak and drip seem amplified. Official logs note that prolonged solitude heightened senses making marksmen detect enemy movements others would miss, but also fueling paranoia. You press your back against the wall and close your eyes, counting each breath. You remind yourself of the mission, hold this position, eliminate threats, and return to the living. Your heartbeat slows, though doubt still flickers at the edges of your thoughts. Minutes pass. You gather your gear, ready to return to the trench line. As you exit, the damp air washes over you like a cold embrace. You look back once, saluting the solitary dugout, not as a refuge, but as a crucible that tempered your resolve. You step into the trench's open maw, and night sounds welcoming in its bleak familiarity. Though isolated, you carry the echo of solitude with you, sharpening your senses but weighing heavy on your spirit. You trudge forward, rifle at the ready, embracing the quiet pressure of isolation's whisper, the silent companion of every sniper's lonely vigil. You press your eye against the scope. For what feels like the 100th time today, the rim of the lens digging into your brow as your vision narrows to a tiny window of no man's land. Every muscle in your neck tenses as you try to hold perfectly still, but the faintest pulse throbs in your temple, reminding you that staring through this little glass prison takes its toll. Official medical reports from 1917 note that sharpshooters frequently suffered from chronic eye strain and headaches, with some men developing temporary vision blurs after prolonged use of early telescopic sights. Historians still argue whether issuing adjustable diopter mounts or prescribing simple eye exercises would have meaningfully reduced these ailments, or if the rigors of trench warfare made such measures a luxury. Your breathing stutters as you twist the focus knob, each click sounding like a countdown to another headache. You recall Section 3's meticulous cleaning ritual: weapons must be pristine. Yet, no amount of oil or graphite can lubricate the soft tissue of your eyeballs. Fringe chatter among veteran marksmen speaks of attaching small rubber cushions around the ocular to soften the impact, but you doubt anyone at HQ would spare rubber for something so frivolous. Light joke. Number 1. You'd swap a week's worth of bully beef for a simple eye patch if it meant giving your peepers a break. I'm Napoleon of the trenches, you'd boast, though you'd end up looking more like a bedraggled pirate than a lethal sniper. The world beyond your lens shimmers as you peer over a shattered coal pile, every so often blinking rapidly to stave off burning eyes. The tiny X carved into your glass drifts with each exhale, as if mocking your efforts at precision. You tighten your cheek against the stock, trying to distribute pressure away from your brow, but the relief is fleeting. Historians still argue whether the British Army should have issued lighter, more ergonomic scopes or invested in optical training alongside marksmanship lessons, given the scale of vision problems reported among frontline sharpshooters. You test this theory by squinting down a length of periscope tube left abandoned by your unit, but it's no better just a cold metal pipe with your reflection staring back. A callback to Section 2. The frost that once bit at your toes now nips at your eyelashes, tiny ice crystals forming on the lens rim. You try to brush them away, but the cold only intensifies the burning ache between your eyebrows. Fringe rumors suggest using glycerin drops borrowed from the field hospital stores to soothe lenses and lids alike. You do it, but those precious supplies are reserved for wounds, not weary optics. Light joke number 2. You imagine trading your scope for a long brass telescope and pretending you're Captain Cook, discovering new worlds except your world is a muddy crater, and your discoveries are strictly fatal. You shift your gaze to the ridge where German observers once stood, tracking infantry advances. Your scope picks up a movement, 2 figures climbing over a parapet. You raise your rifle, but the pain behind your eyes sharpens into a staccato buzz. You clench your jaw and remind yourself that every second counts. Hesitation can cost lives. You fire, squeezing the trigger in time with a blink, letting the shot rip through your shoulder rather than your vision. The silhouette drops and a secondary target flees behind a ruined wall. You recalibrate on the fly, but your crosshairs swim as your eyes protest the strain. Medical officers call the phenomenon scope eyes, a creeping malady with no cure, short of rest, something in dire shortage. When every marksman counted as a strategic asset, you resist the urge to shake your head, fearing the world will spiral when you steady yourself again. Light joke number 3. You grit your teeth and vow that if you survive this war, you'll open the world's first optometry shop. A sniper's vision, guaranteed sharp, or your last bow. You imagine customers complaining, "My glasses make me dizzy," and you reply, "Try being shot at while wearing them." The morning haze lifts sunlight, slanting across the chalky earth, and you feel the first real twinge of relief as the angle shifts your scope away from the burning prism of sun glare. You breathe more evenly, letting your eyes relax on a patch of green beyond the wires. An ankle-high bloom of grass, stubbornly twisting through the mud. That small sign of life offers an unexpected balm. You recall Section 7's flooded trenches and the way you once longed for anything living in this dead zone. Now, a tuft of grass reminds you that sight is more than a tool for killing, it's a tether to the world beyond. Historians still argue whether frontline rotations should have been shorter to preserve mental health and physical well-being, eye strain included, or if the urgency of war justified every sacrifice. You slide your scope off the rifle and prop it on a sandbag, covering the lens with a cloth to block the sun. You rub your temples with gloved fingers, massaging away the ache. You've spent hours driven by adrenaline, but now the fatigue blooms into a dull throb behind your skull. You tilt your head back, staring at the jagged skyline, barbed wire lace, crumbling chimneys, skeletal trees, clutching at the sky. It's as if the battlefield itself empathizes, its broken branches reflecting your frayed nerves. You run a finger along the scope's broken leather strap, wishing for a moment that the world could be as simple as swapping a broken piece for a fresh one. As your vision clears, you catch sight of a lone officer on a destroyed rooftop, binoculars in hand. The chance for a final well-placed shot prickles your resolve. You lift the rifle scope back on, align the crosshairs, and this time you don't hesitate. The shot cracks, echoing through the ruined village. The officer crumples and you allow your eyes one triumphal blink before lowering the rifle. Relief floods you, task complete, vision intact, for now. You wipe the sweat from your brow, mindful of the lens's delicate surface, and slip the scope back into its makeshift cover. You rest for a moment, head tipped back, breathing the cold air. Your vision is blurry but undisturbed. The worst of the strain recedes like a tide. You gather your gear, knowing each future shot will test your eyes again. But for this brief respite, you've proven that even tortured optics can deliver deadly clarity. You shoulder your rifle and step back into the trench, the world sifting back into focus around you, one painstaking blink at a time. You crouch behind a battered sandbag wall, fingers brushing the empty shell casings piled at your feet, each one a testament to moments when you had firepower and moments when you didn't. Supply lines are tenuous, and tonight, you're acutely aware that your precious rounds could run dry before your watch ends. Military dispatches from late 1916 report that many frontline units face ammunition shortages, sometimes curtailing artillery barrages and reducing sniper patrols to conserve bullets. Historians still argue whether prioritizing elite marksmen in the supply chain would have been more effective, or if the sheer scale of the Western Front made equitable distribution impossible. You pad the few rounds left in your pouch, 5, maybe 6. You remember Section 3's satisfying click when you chambered a fresh cartridge after cleaning your rifle. That ritual feels distant now, replaced by the hollow dread of counting shells like a miser tallying coins. Fringe chatter among snipers claimed some units resorted to melting down captured shell fragments to cast makeshift bullets, a recipe for misfires and disaster. You scoff at the thought of jury-rigged ammunition, but file it under desperate measures. Light joke number 1. You'd consider trading your watch not for time, but for 2 extra rounds. Sure, you get an extra minute, but you can't shoot with it. A whisper runs through your trench. The supply wagon broke down. 2 miles back, wheels, shredded by shell craters. Relief parties are en route, but every minute feels like an eternity when you're counting down your shots. You shift your rifle to rest on the sandbag's eyes, scanning a shattered farmhouse silhouette in the moonlight. You debate your strategy. Do you take every clear shot and breeze, depleting your ammo before dawn? Or do you hold fire waiting for a high-value target, but risking friendly casualties from unimpeded enemy movements? Historians still argue whether sniper doctrine should focus on taking out officers to demoralize the enemy or suppressing machine gun nests to aid infantry advances. The choice is never clear in the fog of war. You glance at the pale glow of a distant flare, a German unit conducting a patrol. You estimate 3 riflemen against 2 machine gunners near a collapsed barn. 3 rounds to neutralize 5 threats. The odds aren't in your favor. You tuck your chin, weighing options. Fringe stories had it that some snipers carried inert rounds, blanks, loaded to produce noise and decoy the enemy, hoping to scare them into revealing their positions. But without proper primers, blanks can backfire or simply jam your rifle. You decide the illusion isn't worth the gamble. Light joke number 2. You imagine sending a memo to HQ requesting more bullets, or at least a sharpshooter-themed Monopoly set, go directly to jail. Could be, go directly to no man's land. Moonlight shimmers on the craters below. A lone German officer steps into the open surveying the night. You align your crosshairs, squeezing 1 round through the barrel. You watch the silhouette collapse, 1 shot gone. 5 left. Your heart pounds, adrenaline and calculation dancing. The corporal emerges next halfway between the cover and your nest, too tempting to ignore. You fire again, 2 rounds gone. 3 left. In the fleeting quiet, you recall Section 6's counter-sniper tactics. Firing too many shots risks drawing enemy sharpshooters to your location. You pause, letting cool air wash over you, dampening the heat in your chest. A murmur in the trench behind you signals movement reinforcements or more supply rumors. You strain to hear through the night's hush. Your ear catches the soft rasp of canvas and metal. You shift, tucking away your spent casings, mindful of the need to recycle every bit of gear. Historians still argue whether centralized ammunition depots near the front lines would have alleviated these shortages or simply become artillery targets, further crippling supply. There's no easy answer, only the cold arithmetic of rounds left versus threats faced. Light joke number 3, you mutter. Only 3 bullets to save the world, or at least my platoon's breakfast tomorrow. You grin at the absurdity, the brief levity. A bomb against anxiety. You spot movement at the edge of the orchard, a machine gun nest, silhouetted against the trees. 4 barrels glint ominously. You close your eyes, gathering focus. 3 bullets won't silence all 4 guns. But if you can drop the gunner and jam the mechanism, the nest goes silent. You lift your rifle, knocking a fresh round, and exhale steadily. The scope riffling magnifies your target, the gun's breech panel. With surgical precision, you squeeze the trigger 1 round. The gun jars the gunner's body, collapsing backward. You fire again at the tripod, bending its legs. 2 rounds are gone. 1 left. Your finger hovers, calculating the remaining bullet. Could take out the ammo feed if you're accurate. You lick your dry lips and steady your breathing. You find the seam where the belt feeds, align your sight and squeeze. The final shot snaps, the feed belt jerks, then hangs limp. The machine gun nest falls silent. A tenuous hush blankets the orchard. You allow yourself a breath victory tempered by scarcity. 0 rounds left. Brittle silence follows. You lower your rifle and lean against the trench wall, every muscle slack. You imagine the taste of coffee back at camp, the warmth of a fire, and the comfort of knowing ammunition waits behind you. But tonight, all you have is darkness, mud, and empty pouches. You reap the tactical reward of a trench, cleared for your infantry's dawn advance, but at the cost of every round you had. Historians still argue whether snipers should have conserved more ammo for sustained harassment rather than concentrated strikes. You reach into your pocket and find a single tobacco leaf, dry and brittle. You light it with a match, inhaling the acrid smoke. It's a poor substitute for a cigarette, but enough to steady your nerves. You swing your feet onto the duckboards, moving toward the rear lines. Behind you, the orchard lies, hushed, your handiwork etched in silent ruin. Ahead, uncertain relief lines flicker with lamp glow. You'll have to scavenge rounds from fallen comrades or await the next supply run, all while knowing that each watch brings the same dilemma: more targets than bullets. And as you trudge back, empty pouches, weighing less than guns, but heavier than regret, you realize that in a war of attrition, sometimes the sharpest edge isn't the bullet. It's the question of when to pull the trigger. You crouch behind a shell crater lip rifle, trained on the silhouettes of enemy officers conferring by lantern light. Your mind a battleground of orders, ethics, and necessity. Each fatal shot carries weight beyond the trigger's pull. You're not just a marksman, but a judge of life and death wrestling with the moral quicksand beneath your boots. Military code labeled sniping as both a strategic asset and a breach of gentlemanly warfare traditions, fueling debates on the marksman's role. Historians still argue whether snipers violated chivalric codes or merely adapted to the brutal demands of trench stalemate. Some commanders insisted sharpshooters were heroes. Others sneered at dirty killing from concealment. You recall Section 6's counter-sniper hunts and Section 10's rationed rounds. Every shot now feels like an echo in a moral canyon. Fringe discussions whispered at mess gatherings claimed elite snipers sometimes negotiated secret pacts with enemy marksmen. One shot exchanged for another, a grisly duel of honor amid chaos. You doubt such chivalry ever existed beyond salty rumor, but the idea lingers like a ghost. Light joke number 1. You imagine penning a pamphlet titled Etiquette for Assassins, complete with proper tea time intervals between shots. The absurdity eases the tension if only for a moment. You take a breath, each inhale tasting of gun oil and guilt. The officer's laughter drifts on the wind, human sounds, jarring against everything you've grown to expect. Silence, tension, and that signature crack of the rifle. Your finger trembles near the trigger. You remind yourself of orders eliminate command figures to blunt enemy morale. Hasten the end of the slaughter. A clink of metal on metal catches your ear. You glance to your left and spot a discarded lighter glinting in the crater's shadows. You pocketed a small trophy from the invisible war. Fringe lore held that snipers collected such trinkets as mementos, tokens of each kill, though you're unsure whether that marks you as colder than ice or simply human. Light joke number 2. You consider engraving your kills on the lighter's case. Officer Schmidt, 8 p.m. Fireworks show a grim souvenir. You shudder at the dark humor. You refocus on the officers, 3 men in long coats, gesturing at a tattered map. Their features are blurred by smoke. They seem unaware of your gaze, slicing through the dark. You steady your breath, recalling Section 9's eye strain. Your vision wavers at the scope's edge, but you force clarity. Military dispatches note that removing high-ranking officers often disrupted enemy operations more than mass infantry casualties. Yet, some generals argued that focusing on supply lines or artillery crews yielded greater strategic payoff. Historians still argue which targets truly shortened the war officer's artilleryman or industrial factories behind the lines. Your cheek presses into the stock as you align the crosshairs on the tallest figure. You weigh the humanity behind that silhouette. A father, perhaps, with dreams shattered by orders. But at this distance, life and death are numbers in a report. The decision solidifies. Light joke number 3. You remind yourself that hesitation here counts as cowardice. Though sneaking behind enemy lines might feel more like espionage than valor. You squeeze the trigger. The shot cracks like a gunshot applause. They scatter. One officer collapses, lamp tumbling into the mud smoke, trailing upward like a wounded bird. The other 2 duck behind, covers mouths open in shockproof that not all messages pass through bullets. Some come in the form of silence. You reload methodically, every movement betraying calm intent. Your heart pounds beneath the stock, questioning whether each pulse brings relief or remorse. Yet duty prevails. Seconds later, you fire twice more, securing the kill count prescribed. The silence that follows is thick, no footsteps, no laughter, just the splatter of mud as you withdraw. You fulfilled orders, but at the cost of something deeper. A sliver of your soul chipped away. With each pull of the trigger, you slip back into the trench's embrace. Lighter-pocketed mind racing. The moral quicksand remains, but for tonight, you've navigated its treacherous currents. You crouch at the trench's edge as the first gray hints of dawn creep over the horizon. Your last shot from the night echoing faintly in the distance. Around you, sleeping figures huddle beneath soggy blankets, trusting the lullaby of silence. But you know better, the attack is coming, and your sniper's curse is to be both a guardian and a target once the infantry moves forward. Official battle plans designate snipers to provide covering fire during dawn assaults, picking off enemy machine gunners and officers as infantry advances across no man's land. Historians still argue whether snipers saved more lives by thinning enemy ranks beforehand or if their stationary posts made them sitting ducks once bombardments open. You rack a fresh round, wait for an empty click. You've exhausted your entire stash under the moon. You'd hope for resupply after Section 10's desperate spree, but orders changed and your ammo cache remains dry. Fringe rumors spoke of snipers scavenging rounds from fallen comrades during the assault, risking exposure to ammo-poisoning booby traps left by retreating units. You hesitate to test your luck. Light joke number 1. You could go barefoot into no man's land and pick up shells like Easter eggs if only those eggs didn't sometimes explode. Still, duty compels you. You switch to your sidearm, a revolver you seldom practice with, and slide out of the trench rifle slung. The cold air bites as you step onto the duckboards, boots clattering over wood. You pause at the parapet, scanning the horizon, barbed wire shell craters and silhouettes of your own troops gathering. Instruction manuals warned that revolvers were less accurate beyond 50 yards, but trained marksmen could land shots in the head up to 70. Historians still argue whether equipping snipers with lighter semi-automatic pistols might have given them more mobility and firepower during rapid advances. You twist the grip of your Webley revolver, noting its weight and the reassuring click as you chamber a round. Fringe chatter claimed some marksmen dipped their pistol rounds in poison to ensure one shot would be enough, but you dismissed the dark thought. You're lethal enough without chemical assistance. Light joke number 2. You imagine engraving your revolver cylinder with last laugh, a morbid nod to your final stand. At your signal, the infantry surges forward in ragged lines. You fire your pistol twice at a machine gun crew, silhouetted atop a bunker 20 yards away. The shots bark in the dawn stillness. 2 men drop, and the third dives for cover. Your heart hammers as you fire again, pistol recoiling against your hand. Despite the pistol's roar, you hold your position, sweeping across the battlefield. You spot an enemy sniper's muzzle, flash glinting atop a crater ridge. Inspired by Section 6's counter-sniper tips, you raise your pistol and squeeze off a single round, an absurd duel of 6 shooters and mousers across a sea of mud. The shot rings out no reply. The ridge goes silent. As your rifle remains out of reach, you consider sprinting to retrieve it, but the advancing smoke and artillery fire make the crossing suicidal. Instead, you stay low, revolver-ready carving paths through enemy heads until orders send you back to cover. Light joke number 3. You muse that if you survive, you'll write a memoir titled Pistols at Dawn, the sniper's second act. Your lieutenant's shout signals a rally. The bunker is taken. Flames flicker from its windows as fallback grenades ignite debris. You holster your revolver, adrenaline still coursing. The dawn assault shifts from chaos to consolidated victory. Your pistols help tip the scales, even without your beloved rifle. You slip back into the empty trench, the revolver's weight a poor stand-in for the bolt action you love. You collapse against the wall, heart still pounding, and stare at the rising sun, spilling pink light over shattered earth. Despite the unconventional toolkit, you fulfilled your covering fire duty. But as you close your eyes, the taste of gunpowder lingers sharper than any triumph. You wonder whether the sniper's role in an assault is worth the sacrifice of precision, familiarity, and sometimes sanity. You stagger from the trench onto a shell-pocked ridge, every footstep echoing with the distant boom of artillery. Your vision swims not from the smoke, but from the weight of memories. Each shot you fired, each life you ended, looping in your mind like a warped film reel. You clasp your rifle tighter, as if its cold metal can anchor you in reality. Medical officers after the war identified a condition they called combat fatigue, later known as PTSD, affecting many snipers who survived, tormenting them with flashbacks, insomnia, and haunting dreams. Historians still argue whether early recognition and rest periods could have spared snipers lifelong psychological scars, or if the brutality of static trench warfare made such damage inevitable. You pause against a shattered tree stump, heart pounding as the echo of a shell burst drags you back to nights in Section 8's dugout, where every drip and creak felt like an enemy's footfall. Fringe whispers among veterans told of snipers developing hypersensitive hearing, able to detect the faintest boot tread, but tormented by phantom sounds in peacetime. You cup your ear, half expecting to hear a phantom bolt click. Light joke number 1. You'd kill for a moment of silence, literally, but silence here is as rare as a dry boot in a flooded trench. A sudden cough shakes your shoulders, and you press a gloved hand over your mouth, breathing into it to staunch the tremors. You remember Section 5's rat-infested feast and Section 7's ankle-deep water, simple horrors that, combined with lethal precision, etched themselves into your psyche deeper than any bullet hole. You kneel and survey the battlefield's aftermath, twisted wire-like fallen teeth bodies, half buried in mud, and the bitter tang of cordite lingering in the air. Your rifle rests heavily across your lap, each shell casing a reminder of lives reduced to numbers. You glance at a spent, round, debrat surface, scratched and dull, your talisman and tormentor. Historians still argue whether counseling or rest billets offered briefly behind the lines could have repaired a sniper's mental health or simply prolonged the inevitable breakdown once they returned. You wonder if a warm bed and sympathetic voice might have spared you these recurring nightmares. Fringe anecdotes spoke of marksmen carrying pocket Bibles, or small trinkets from home photos, letters a child's toy to ground them when the memories surged. You pat your breast pocket fingers brushing an old locket containing your sister's portrait. Its weight offers a fleeting comfort against the storm in your mind. Light joke number 2. You joke to yourself that if nightmares had a rank, they'd be the colonels of terrors, always leading the charge when you crave sleep. You rise unsteadily, shoulders aching, and scan the horizon. The once crisp line between friend and foe has blurred into a haze of grief. Each corpse you left behind seems to call to you in the wind. You wrench your gaze to a distant farmhouse. Its windows shattered and the roof collapsed like a sigh. You press the locket to your chest, willing its memory to shield you. Official war studies noted that many snipers returned home unable to reintegrate, haunted by the intimacy of their kills, mortally wounded by the solitary nature of their work. Historians still argue whether post-war support networks or military funerals honoring sniper service could have alleviated survivors' guilt, or if the stigma of hidden killing closed every possible healing door. You press your cheek against the rifle's stock, feeling its familiar weight. You close your eyes, imagining the echo of children's laughter instead of artillery, a callback to Section 9's longing for green grass beyond the wire. The fantasy flickers and dies in your mind's trench. Light joke number 3. You whisper that if laughter is the best medicine, trench humor might just cure you if you can remember how to laugh. You take a deep breath cutting through the damp air and offer a silent promise to hold on to the parts of yourself untouched by the sniper's path to seek life beyond the scope's crosshairs. You slip the locket back in place, ready to shoulder your rifle and face whatever comes next. You trudge back into the trench under a fragile ceasefire. The tense, quiet, more eerie than any bombardment. Across from you, German snipers perch in their muddy nests, rifles trained on your every move. A bitter reminder that peace here is only as deep as your breath. Official ceasefires were declared sporadically for exchanges of the wounded or recovery of the dead, most famously during a Christmas 1914, when both sides reportedly sang carols and traded cigarettes along the front lines. Historians still argue whether such truces were genuine attempts at humanity or mere tactical pauses exploited by hidden marksmen. You advance slowly, hands raised and unarmed, stepping onto the flat expanse between the trenches, no man's land turned hollow by unspoken rules. Fringe whispers claim that some snipers lurked within sight of flag-waving stretcher-bearers, tallying potential targets amid the fraternization, ready to shatter goodwill with a single whisper of a shot. You keep your eyes peeled for any flash into dusk. Light joke number 1. You half expect one of your comrades to break into Silent Night on a harmonica just before an unseen sniper turns the melody into a gunshot. The irony would be both tragic and absurd. You recall Section 6's duels, snipers stalking snipers, and realize that during these hypothetical truces, the real games were played in the shadows. You step forward to another yard boots, squelching on the churned earth, and spot a German marksman's silhouette, behind an upturned shell case. He freezes when you do rifle resting on the crate's edge, like a grudging prop. Historians still argue whether commanders tacitly sanctioned sniper ambushes during ceasefires, believing that moral high ground could mask tactical violations, or if those who fired were simply rogues acting without orders. Official war diaries sometimes gloss over these incidents, hinting only at isolated shots rather than full betrayals of trust. You pause, heart clenching, as the German's scope swivels toward you. Both of you share a moment of silent acknowledgement, two silent hunters entangled by unwritten rules. You weigh your options: honor the ceasefire and risk later retribution, or preempt his shot and breach the truce yourself. Light joke number 2. You'd almost write a polite note. Dear Herr Sniper, apologies in advance, but there's no stationery here. Only rifling and regret. You exhale and drop your hands, signaling peaceful intent. The German lowers his rifle fractionally, the tension in his shoulders easing. You recall the warmth of Section 12's dawn assault, a stark contrast to this fragile dance of weapons, silenced by whispered agreements. Fringe legends spoke of honor duels conducted under ceasefires, where snipers met in shallow craters to trade personal items before parting without a shot if both survived. You wonder if that could ever have been more than fantasy. As you take a step closer, a crack splits the air, a flare gun fired in celebration of a temporary truce's success. Bright light floods the hollow and both sets of rifles slump as stretcher-bearers emerge, carrying the wounded to neutral ground. You and the German exchange a curt nod. Two enemies briefly united by shared duty. But as soon as the last stretcher passes, a distant shout declares the ceasefire over. Rifles snap up on both sides like flowers opening to gunpowder. You and your counterpart slip back to cover, rifles humming with renewed purpose. Historians still argue whether these brief respites did more harm than good racing hopes, only to dash them with renewed violence, or providing the invaluable gift of humanity amid hell. You've seen both sides, the comfort of shared songs and the sting of betrayal by a single shot. Light joke number 3. You muse that if ceasefires had been regulated by signature-bearing snipers' guilds, at least there'd be an official rulebook to consult before firing. But here, the only laws are those written in trenches and broken by bullets. You duck beneath the parapet, rifle at the ready, as the German sniper above you reappears, scope train finger poised. The moment has passed, and the unspoken agreement dissolves, like mist under gunfire. You settle into your muddy berth heart, pounding with the aftershocks of hope and dread. In this hollow no-man island of tenuous peace, you learn that sniping isn't simply about distance or skill. It's about navigating the fragile boundary between humanity and hatred, where a single bullet can end both a life and a moment of grace. You step back from the parapet, boots sinking into mud that seems to swallow each footfall, and trace the landscape one last time with your weary gaze. The trenches you've called home stretch like labyrinthine scars across the earth, every twist a chapter in this grim tale. You pause at a shattered signpost marking north and south and wonder if any path out of this hell truly exists. After the armistice, military historians noted that the silent service of snipers reshaped battlefield doctrine, proving that individual skill could thwart mass assaults, but at a cost few acknowledged. Historians still argue whether the sniper's legacy was strategic brilliance or a terrifying precedent for guerrilla tactics in wars to come. Your rifle, once a gleaming instrument of precision, now bears the dents of 1,000 hardships shell, splinters mud-caked stock, and a scope lens scratched by grit. You remember how it felt back in Section 1, fresh from the armory, its metal singing under your hands. Now each scar tells a story. The soldier you watched rise in the dawn mist. The German officer silhouetted by a dying farmhouse. The machine gun nest, silenced by your last precious rounds. Fringe lore among veterans claimed that some snipers wrapped their rifles in secretly carved inscriptions, names, dates, victories, turning weapons into grim memorials. You run your fingers along the barrel, half expecting to feel the groove of your etchings. You'd have carved November 1916, Bullecourt, July 1917, Passchendaele, and April 1918. Villers-Bretonneux if permission and light had allowed. Light joke number 1. You'd brand your rifle silent partner, though the irony of calling a lead pipe comforting seems lost on no one. You shoulder the rifle and make your way toward the rear assembly area, where the din of camp life rises in muffled waves. Here, laughter mingles with lamplight smoke curls from cooking fires, and the wounded shuffle about with hollow eyes and haunted dreams. You pass a group of new volunteers, bright-eyed and trembling, unaware of the invisible crosshairs always trained on them figuratively, if not literally. Military reports after the war praised sniper squads for their role in halting enemy advances, but neglected to mention the endless vigilance snipers endured hours, staring through rifled scopes, eyes fixed on death's doorstep. Historians still argue whether post-war recognition systems, medal citations adequately honored these silent hunters, or if their contributions were overshadowed by mass infantry narratives. You pause at a makeshift tribute wooden crosses planted in a muddy patch, each bearing the name of the sniper detachment's fallen. A chill runs through you as you read Turner, James, Riley, C. Peel, Fritz, Weber, Sartarzon, Ivan, Petrov. These names blur together both friend and foe, and you realize that in death, you're all equally silent. Fringe anecdotes spoke of snipers attending clandestine memorials under full moons, sharing tales of shots that saved comrades, and those that haunted them a brotherhood bound by purpose and guilt. You imagine slipping into such a gathering trading stories that aren't fit for the official gazette. Light joke number 2. You'd bring a flask to toast your fellow shadows, racing a silent salute in the moonlight, though the risk of drunks at dawn would scare any disciplined marksman. You lift your gaze to the darkened sky, tracing constellations that once guided your routes across no man's land, now charting courses home. You wonder if the stars remember your shape, scuttling through craters, rifle at port arms, hunting ghosts in the gloom. As you reach the tent lines, your commander awaits, clad in a muddy greatcoat, and bearing the weight of unwelcome news. The sniper corps is being disbanded. You'll return to regular units, or perhaps sent home. No more secret perches, no more solitary watches. The irony tastes bittersweet. You've survived the sniper's lonely vigil, only to rejoin the masses you long to protect and now resent. Military analyses argued for permanent sniper schools and specialized units in future conflicts, but interwar budgets and public memory favored grand infantry parades over hushed sharpshooter doctrine. Historians still argue whether snipers' techniques should have become standard training or remained dubious fringe tactics. You tuck your rifle under the tent's rafters, a temporary berth, and step into the flickering lamp glow. You catch your reflection in a cracked mirror, sleep-deprived eyes, sunken cheeks, fingers stained by oil and blood. Yet, beneath it all, a spark remains, a resolute ember, nurtured by each successful shot, each life saved by a bullet that found its mark. Light joke number 3. You catch yourself grinning at the absurdity, thankful there's no periscope rifle here to capture the moment. You step outside and draw a long breath of damp night air. The earth beneath your boots no longer trembles with shellfire, but vibrates with the heartbeat of a relieved army. You feel the tension draining from your shoulders, replaced by something like a release. Every sniper leaves behind a legacy. Written in shadows, men and women who bore witness to war in silent focus, whose unseen work shaped battles, and whose absent voices haunted peacetime. You place a hand on the tense fabric, your final shelter in this eerie calm, and murmur a farewell to the ghostly dialogues etched in crosshairs and echoes. You turn away night's hush, wrapping around you like a salute, knowing that your path forward is uncharted, but forever guided by the lessons learned through a rifle's scope. Softly now, you let the rifle's weight fade from your limbs, settling into the gentle quiet that lingers after the storm of conflict. Imagine the rhythmic cadence of your breath slow, and even as tension unravels, from shoulder to hand, from cheek to chest. Feel the warmth of a distant campfire's glow, its amber light, dancing across the earth, reassuring you that you are safe beyond the trench's grip. Your mind drifts across no man's land, transformed into a peaceful field, wildflowers nodding in a gentle breeze, where barbed wire once snarled. Each blade of grass whispers stories of healing, and each ray of morning sun promises renewal. Embrace the soft hum of life, returning birds offering tentative songs and leaves stirring in a lullaby of hope. Remember the strength you carried through endless watches, the courage that steadied your finger, the purpose that guided every breath and heartbeat. These virtues remain with you, a quiet reservoir of resolve to draw upon when shadows gather. Yet now you may lay down the scope, free to explore horizons, unshackled by fear. Allow each exhale to carry away the grime of trenches, the chill of dawn assaults, and the echo of distant gunfire. With every inhalation, welcome in peace, warmth, and the gentle promise of rest. You are more than the sum of your battles. You are the calm after the storm, the silent observer permitted to dream. Soon, sleep will claim you, wrapping you in a velvet cloak where nightmares cannot follow. Let your thoughts drift to soft meadows, star-filled skies, and the reassuring pulse of home. As eyelids grow heavy, know that you have earned this respite, and that tomorrow you may wake refreshed, held by the gentle embrace of possibility, rather than the ruthless discipline of a crosshair. Good night and sweet dreams.